welcome to Walpole United WFC.
Good evening and welcome to Walpole United Saturday Night Live. Joining me tonight, I've got John Foster. John, how are we?
I'm okay. I'm not too sure if my hair's okay. I've got everything going on there. I need one of your lightnings. That's what I need. I've ordered one for Christmas. I don't usually see that bad because there's usually 4 of us on the screen, so I'm smaller. But yeah, I'll sort that out when I've got time to buy a light. But at the moment, I haven't. But yeah, apart from that, I'm okay.
There we go. Make me a little bit smaller. No,
you okay?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks. Just counting down to Christmas. I know that sounds like I'm rubbing it in because you work in retail and it's busy, but I need a break, literally. But yeah, all good. Can't complain. I just hope you've been good enough to get your light ring off Father Christmas. Otherwise, that's going to be a bit of a disaster, isn't it?
I've had one saved on my Amazon basket for ages. I just need to click buy now and just do it.
That's it. That's the way forward, John. Make an Amazon wish list and just send it around. Whoever gets your Christmas presents, just be like, right, this is it. This is John's Amazon wish list. Top 10 items that John wants. Light ring being number 1. Some studio lights.
Black is number 1. Light ring number 2. Go from there.
Yeah. Happy days. So anyway, tonight's show then, we're going to be getting into, obviously, news broke earlier this week of Man United Women put out a job advert for a women's head of football. I believe they're taking applications now for that. We'll do a little bit of a Brighton preview and we'll very, very briefly touch on it. Got announced a couple of days ago. Alessia Russo won the Golden Month for November. So absolutely buzzing about that. So yeah, quite a bit to get through. So I may as well start with the main news then. Obviously, head of women's football, we're looking to bring somebody in. Whether that is something that happens in January, depending how quick recruitment is, we don't know. But I think, and I'll get your sort of view in a sec, John. I think for me, this is something that's needed. I did a show back, must have been about summertime, and it was talking about a director of football. Now, obviously, it's similar. It's not the same. And I sort of said, we needed a director of football. I'd be happy personally for somebody like Siobhan Chamberlain because she's not only got a great media career, but she's doing a master's, for those that don't know, in sort of sports sort of management and business. So my thinking was she'd be perfect. She knows the club inside out. She's been there since season 1. It was just whether at the time this was something she'd be interested in. That said, I've recently read comments on Twitter saying that we should avoid sort of sentimental ties or ties where it's somebody that has not necessarily done that role before. So I can understand it for both sides, which we'll get into sort of in a little while. But John, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it then, first of all. Do you think it's good?
100%. I think we'll talk about Siobhan shortly. But for me, we just need some support above Skinner to one of 2 things. One, to either support him, to give him the tools to do his job because it looks like he's lacking at the moment on that, or 2, to make a decision on if him and the players aren't suitable enough. We need someone to bring in who are suitable. So we don't need to go down the whole debate at the moment about is the team and the manager good enough to get us to where we need to be, but it's going to get to a point where if Skinner and the players aren't suitable, it's the board who have chose these players and these manager. So we need someone who can make the right decisions. And you'd like to think that the director of football would do that. Siobhan, I think if you're going down the sentimentality route, who knows the club, then yeah, I think Siobhan would probably be the first pick. I can't think of anyone else really, regarding the women's team at least, who would be suitable. But I think me personally now, I think we've seen a lot of that in the men's team. I think I'd rather go for the best in class. Now, if Siobhan is the best in class, then that's fine. But alternatively, you could go down the route of another team who's set up really well and kind of pinch one of those, or someone who's kind of shadowed or being the right-hand person for someone who's already at that level. So it's definitely needed. I think we'll probably see that person come in maybe February time next year, before maybe like the England international kind of that little mini tournament. I think get it all done out the way. I think January might be too early. But yeah, I'd love to see it in January, February, and then plans can start getting ready for the summer, whether that be training, whether that be like the training facilities, whether it be transfer window in summer. But we do need to act upon it. I got no problem waiting the additional 2 months if it means that we get the right person. But yeah, I'll be looking at early next year, definitely.
Yeah. Do you know what? You've sort of already answered my next question there, because I was going to say, does it have to be somebody sort of with experience or somebody that knows the club? And I think you answered it well. I think, like you say, most fans would rather wait to get the best person. And again, I think for me, I'd kind of gone more with, like I say, Chamberlain because of knowing the club, but then thinking about it, to be fair, without knowing what that role entails, that could potentially, and I don't mean it's disrespectful, could potentially be an issue. I think they talked about the job and they said, club are looking for somebody to sort of head up operations on and off the pitch to help players and the staff compete at an even higher level than we already are. And they play a key role in ensuring that, our women's side do meet aims and objectives set by the board. And are obviously also going to be responsible for implementing a playing style across all of the women's teams, something which we'll get onto later. But I think for me, it's really interesting. I think this is something that's needed now. I think season 4, it's something where we look at it and other clubs, even if we go to sort of our men's side, for example, there was 2 new directorial roles sorted out earlier this year there. And I think for me now, it just sort of emphasises that commitment. I know on your Thursday show I was watching with you and Deborah and Connor, there was sort of people asking about, is the club fully committed to the women's team? Now they're back in it. I think this should go some of the way into maybe easing those fears. I'm not saying it completely eases the fears by all means, but I think in a fan's mind or in match-going fans' minds, I'm happier now knowing that, well, actually, we're looking at the bigger picture. We're looking at off the pitch, we're looking at on the pitch, we're looking at the way of playing, we're looking at the day-to-day running of the club. And I think what was difficult about this sort of role in seasons 1, 2, and 3 was that Casey was heavily involved in a lot of it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think if you're a manager, you should kind of stick to that side of the game without trying to do the whole lot. Because let's not forget, she was a manager or first team coach, however you want to refer to her. It's not the job of them to be taking on too much and doing that. Their job is to get on the pitch correct for me. So I think with that said, like you said, John, if it's February, it's February. You look towards summer, but I think this is something now that, we should be looking at. And I think it just helps provide that link. Obviously John Murtaugh's obviously involved in both sides, but he's more heavily involved in the men. And I think when there's sort of questions raised, obviously e.g. facilities last year, or, the academy or the devs or whichever, I think this is now like a go-to link. And I think you'll probably see a lot more sort of, what should we say, like improvement in the community as well. But I don't know if there's anything you want to add to what I've just said there about sort of disappointment and sort of the excitement around.
There's a couple of things I want to touch on. I think for me, welfare and transfers would be the one that this candidate needs to be doing this, because, as you say, Casey was doing a hell of a lot in their first 3 seasons, but I think it's expanded a lot since then as well. And that takes me on to my second point as well. We talk about Siobhan knowing the club. Yes, she does know the club. However, the club's kind of changing quite quickly.
Yeah.
In the sense of, obviously, new manager now. The players have changed a lot, and the players are going to change a lot more. The squad, the squad's going to change a lot. The playing style is going to change a lot. The training facilities, where they were training, where they're training now, have changed since the first season. So I think there's a lot to look at, and I think it is really important that we do get. It does need to be that best in class, someone who can know the European market, or who at least can attract the European market. So if they don't know them directly, if they haven't got the contacts, then at least the players can look at this figurehead and think, oh yeah, okay, I'm not coming for the manager, I'm not coming for the club, but I'm coming for the director of football. Something you've got to have that. You've got to have something about you to attract some of these big name players, or the opposite. they want to come because they want to be a part of something that's growing. And I think that's at the moment where we've managed to get the likes of Jackie Groningen and Honor and some of these top names. They've come because they can see something that's developing, and we need to keep that going. At the moment, it looks like that we're kind of stale. If we can get into the top 3, or if we can see something else behind the scenes where it's growing, I think we'll attract these big names. And I think having just a director of football in general, shows that we're moving in the right direction. So I think it's a massive appointment. I really do. But they need to be very clued up. It can't just be someone for the sake of it. It needs to be someone who can really push Skinner, but also support him as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like you talk about transfers and sort of knowing the market, because I think something that, I mean, again, I could be miles out of this, but I think something we don't do too well, or we don't have in place, is in the women's side, is a big sort of scouting network or structure. If you look at staff of the men's side, and I'm not saying we need to go out and get a load of staff by all means, but if you look, they've got scouts, and you look at the women's side, and then maybe one, or in the case, and again, I keep going back to Casey, but we were at tournaments and games as fans, and she'd be there with the rest of the coaches, which is fine when you're not sort of, it's an international window and things like that. But scouting's usually done all year round. And I think back to Jackie Groningen, she was tracked for a good 12 to 18 months before she came in. And, obviously, again, Thursday on your show, Deborah was talking about, potential list of transfer targets and plans in place. And I think, like you say, if we've got something there and, like you say, somebody to support Skinner, it just takes a little bit of the burden away from him. And, obviously he's come out and said, hasn't he, we're looking in the next couple of windows. We want to get players in. And I think working with somebody like that, it just helps with those sort of links abroad, doesn't it? And sort of, like I say, getting things together in a little bit more structure. Because I think at the minute, like you say, you kind of, you question, are we going stale? Are we hitting that sort of, we've peaked and what's to come? And it's not mismatched, but it's a little bit like, we need a bit more structure, right? These are the plans now. This is what's going to happen on and off the pitch. This is what we can do for you, Mark. Where do you need help? Bang, off we go.
Yeah, 100% with structure. And we mentioned the transfers as well. It's almost as if like they've got a list of players who are going out of contract in 6 months' time, 12 months' time, 18 months' time. These are our targets. Okay, which one of these would the manager like?
Yeah.
Along with which one of these will suit our playing style, along with who do you think we can feasibly get? And it's almost as if that's how we're picking the player. It's not as if like we've sent someone over to Sweden or Spain and say, well, we've been watching her for like the last 6 months, game in, game out. Perfect. It's literally like, it's almost like Football Manager. It's basically just a name on a sheet of paper.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, obviously, there is a bit more behind it than that. But generally, I'm sure that's pretty much how they're looking at the initial way of doing it. And then when Man United aren't playing, maybe Skinner will go to a couple of games or we'll send someone over. But that's another thing as well. When a lot of games are being played at the same time, it's very awkward, especially with COVID as well at the moment, getting out of the country to go here, there and everywhere and actually monitor these players. So I appreciate it is a bit more awkward at the moment with what's going on in the world. But even pre-COVID, how many times would a manager actually go and watch a player play before they actually get them in? It's very much like a risk, isn't it? You've taken a gamble on someone who you may have seen bits and bobs of. And it's even very hard to get clips as well, isn't it? In the women's game, unless if they are at that top level. So, yes, scouting is obviously a massive one. And I'm sure that's something that the director of football would be looking at as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I say, just thinking about it, and obviously you mentioned sort of travel there, and obviously for those that sort of are on Instagram, and that's something that I know I keep harping on about, but again, Casey, if anybody follows her on Instagram, her Instagram story, she's been in America now for a little while and putting together her new squad. She's constantly posting clips of games or where she's attending, and she's been out personally watching, which you can do when it's a new club and you're setting up, but that's like you said, that's the sort of role that maybe director of football or not necessarily then maybe a scout would do. And I think, you mentioned having a list of names, which is great, but sometimes those lists of names, especially if they come from another country, it might take time to settle or they may not hit the ground running. We saw it with Jackie, where his owner came in, bang, straight away, gave us last year probably our best player of the year. can't remember. Did she get voted Player of the Year possibly as
Yeah,
well?
she did.
So there you go. So that just shows, yeah. So I think it's that link, isn't it? Like you say, what does Mark want? Who can he turn to and say, I want to play this way. I need a player that can do this, and that's what you do, isn't it? That is scouting in essence, isn't it? Sort of build a report and a little file on these players. And I think just a go-to in between, like you say, managers don't have time, and especially with travel being an absolute faff, he's not got time to go out somewhere, potentially quarantine, faff about with all this paperwork, and then come back. So I think this will just help. And even if, like you say, they can get some sort of videos or there's so much coverage now, you can go on YouTube and watch a game, do you know what I mean? And scout that way from sort of the comfort of your own home. So I think, again, I like to link in, again, something you talked about on Thursday, and you mentioned about Tooney signing a new contract, and she's obviously knows sort of the vision of the club. And I think that's another thing. It's that, and I talk about this again, her sort of relationship, isn't it? That director of football should be sitting down with these players, obviously the manager as well, and sort of saying, right, Jackie, you're out of contract in summer, owner, you are. This is our vision. This is where we're going to go. This is what's going to be happening, and I'll do everything I can to sort of produce that or deliver. And I think then that would kind of, like I said before, it won't fully ease fans' fears, but I think it'll help. Is there anything else you want to add to that before I sort of go on to the next bit, John?
Well, just on the Tooney thing, because I never really elaborated it on the Thursday show. But it is amazingly important, because you can see Tooney this season more than ever before. She's developing into, some people are actually saying, a world-class player. And potentially she is, maybe she isn't, but she's definitely getting up there based on form and how she keeps on progressing. She could have had her choice of clubs. Simple as that. We know, we know the teams that have been after her or in for her or scouting her. She could have gone anywhere, and she's chose to stay here. Now, if that was maybe 6 to 9 months ago when things were up in the air, maybe things would have been different. We saw a lot of players leave the club because they felt that the time was right for them to leave. Tooney's had a chance to leave, and she's not just signed a 1 or 2 year contract. She signed a mega long contract till 2024, I think it is. So it shows that whatever's happening behind the scenes is very positive. We've seen things at like Old Trafford and Carrington, things being upgraded or plans in place being upgraded. So like facilities wise, I don't think it's as bad as it was initially led back in May time. I think COVID obviously brought a lot of that on.
Yeah.
And even little things that we see where like Fuso scored the goal. I can't remember what game it was, maybe City, I can't remember. And everyone ran over to the manager and the coaches. I think, little things like that shows that, they are all together. So as much as we see things behind the scenes, okay, certain players might not be happy about certain things, but in the general scheme of things, it's obviously not that bad. You still want to be at Man United, don't you? And like I say, Tooney could have gone anywhere, and she's ended up staying, which is great.
Yeah, I think, again, just sort of, facilities was on my agenda, shall we say, on my notes. I think that's one thing, it did say sort of a key focus point will be ensuring that we do have the correct sort of playing and training environment to compete with other WSL sides. And they did sort of say, we're quite a way off the pace of Arsenal and Chelsea, which in a way, there's two ways you can look at that. Yes, we are, but no, we're not. And people are going to be watching this thinking, what on earth is he on about? But yes, we are in terms of the league. And yes, we are in terms of how long sort of we've been going. But then no, we're not, because we have only been going 4 years. Arsenal, Chelsea have been going a whole host longer. They've had more investment. They're further ahead in their journey than we are. And we are, I'm not going to say we're matching Man City, because we're not, because we've got no trophies to show for it. But in terms of sort of this season and potentially last season, we pushed them pretty well. I think out of the top 3 of Arsenal, Chelsea and Man City, we're probably closer to Man City for me than we are the other 2. And I think just having, like I say, having this director of football come in and say, right, well, this is what we need. And you talked about expanding facilities and then maybe not being as bad. Obviously we know plans are in place for Carrington and furthermore Old Trafford if we want to go sort of down that route. But I think it is a process, isn't it? And I think sometimes it's hard as a fan, because everybody wants to win and everybody wants the best. And I think You know, you talked about it on Thursday about the amount of sort of media interest and the bigger conversations had on Twitter and things. But I think it's hard to, obviously, when you lose it or results aren't going your way, to look at it with sort of a bias or a negative mindset. Whereas if you look at it on the sort of flip side, 4 years in, and listen, not here singing the club's praises, because there's, you know, the stuff I've said and criticised and said it can do better. But in terms of where we're at so far, it's not absolutely woeful, is it, John? You know, we've not regressed like a Liverpool, but do you want to just sort of add to that and what I was saying, mainly around the sort of the 4 year point about, you know, off the pace of Arsenal and Chelsea, but it's not woefully bad, is it? It's not as bad as it seems.
No, I think obviously that 5 year plan, you know, we should be looking at being in Champions League at the end of this season, I would have thought. Yeah. And I think the fact that Casey resigned put us a year behind. That's my opinion, because I think the transfer window a few months ago was pretty much non-existent, and that didn't help. Changing the manager, whether or not he's better or worse, it's a change and it's a style of play. So it's taking players and him time to adapt to what everybody wants. So it has definitely put us a year behind, which is a shame. I mean, we touched on facilities, and we mentioned on the Thursday show about investment as well. For me, I think it's not just about investing money on the pitch, because I would like to see us kind of build our own bank balance on the women's side. Or else all the top teams are just going to be just where's it going to end? You know, how much money are you going to start pushing into it? For me, I think the money that Man United in general should be spending should be on the facilities and the training ground and things like that. I think, because when you play for Man United, you should be thinking to yourself, right, I'm going to be happy with the facilities. It's going to be the best in class. Whereas when you think of Man United women's team, you don't think about having the best players in the world, because we're not at that level yet. Yeah. So I think that's how I would differentiate how to spend the money on supporting the women's team. It'll be spend over the odds on the facilities, because it's what they deserve playing for Man United. But as for the players, I think you need to build that right, and I think that will come. And I think it's getting that balance between youth, experience, the Galacticos, all this kind of stuff. And I think we had a good balance of that last year, to be honest. But it's got to be sustainable as well.
Yeah, and I think pretty much you've kind of summarised, like I say, the reports out there. They sort of talked about that. They talked about, obviously, not only on the field but off it. And I suppose you could kind of class facilities as off it, because yes, it's related to on the field, but it's like it's not playing personnel. So for me, like you say, upgrading, whether it's facilities, whether it's, you know, working for that match day experience. Obviously, I know that the club, to be fair to them, and I know there was a lot from the supporters club sort of involvement and pushing this, was they have subsidised the bus to Brighton tomorrow. Obviously it's an early kickoff and it's not ideal, but they've very kindly laid on a coach, which, like I say, in season 4, it's only happened once, and it happened when the kind of club were put in a position where they kind of had to do something when the Charlton game got postponed, and then we were there for 10 minutes and then had to come home, and they sort of covered everybody's travel that went to the original fixture. And I think credit there, but it's these things, isn't it, off the pitch as well, that are equally important. You know, obviously you mentioned about getting the balance right, but I think for me, the overall match day experience and the overall way that the club, it doesn't even have to be linked to match day for me, you know, things in the community. For me, I mean, listen, this is me with my sort of coaching background and coaching head on, but sort of things in the community, you know, getting out there, getting the women's team more visible, bringing people in, keeping them sustained to come in. You know, what's the issues surrounding out sort of access to the stadium? What's the issues surrounding ticketing? What's the issues surrounding, you know, why can't people come every week? Or, you know, is there anything the club can do? And I think this is where this sort of head of football will come. You know, they do talk about on and off the pitch, and I think finding a balance of that, if we can get that right with the right person, will be massive in terms of growth and pushing forward. You know, we've already seen fan base increase. You know, we've seen a bigger online presence during lockdown. We've seen a lot more talk on the team, all of which is brilliant, and it's good. And we're there, and we've got better sponsorship, and there's a lot more on telly, and we've got the FA player. But it feels like it's just bringing it together now. And I think this is, like you said, you know, what the head of football will hopefully do.
Yeah, it's another way of looking at it, and not something that I've actually thought about much just yet, because we always think of director of football, head of football, sporting director, what are they going to do for the club, and what they're going to do for the players, what they're going to do for the manager, the link between the board and the manager. But the way you've sold it there is what are they going to do for the fans, and that's another way of looking at it. You've got that structure there. You've got that one with a bit of know-how. Obviously, Siobhan Chamberlain would be fantastic at that because, she would know what the fans want. She's in touch with that. That's just another tick in the box, and another reason why it would help improve not just Man United, but the women's game in general.
Yeah. No, spot on. I think with that, obviously Chamberlain's name is coming up a lot, but I think for me, if there's like a secondary role that can be created, like let's say, for example, she doesn't get it and it goes to somebody who's the right fit and got all the experience, brilliant. Could she potentially be like a sort of an in-between, maybe a link, like you say, between the fans and the club? And I don't see why not. I don't know what you call the role. I don't know whether it'd be director of football or general manager, but
Man United men's team have got a similar thing, haven't they? So you got Nato and Fletcher kind of separated that way. I could understand it's probably a bigger, so obviously it covers more things. So I can understand you needing maybe two in the men's game. But yeah, I'm sure it's definitely possible. There's no fixed thing. That's the thing. We just started out, aren't we? So I don't know if it's Barcelona or Bayern Munich or one of the big teams in the women's game. They've got like a number of higher up people, so it's not just one. There's a few of them, so and it's working well for those. So we can do pretty much anything that works, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, sort of, I know you mentioned obviously I hadn't thought of it from a fan side, but I think that the way I approach it, like I say, one was from my own sort of background, but another thing was sort of having conversations with other people. And I know, obviously, as most people know, I've got a couple of sort of friends / contacts at Leicester, and obviously they've at the minute got Emil Heskey in as their sort of head of football operations. I think he's titled or something like that. And I think it's interesting because I look at what they're doing, and I'm not saying that every club needs to do this or every club gets it right because things go wrong. But, you're looking at what he's doing, and he's obviously bearing in mind that he did take charge of a game. He's been involved in training, but he's sort of, he's involved heavily community-based, and they're sort of like, what can we do in the community? How can we get sort of more female footballers in the game? How can we get so many female coaches in the game? How can we make the matchday experience at Leicester really good? They've got travel. They've got their own travel where the club subsidise travel and it leaves from sort of the stadium. And he's played a big role in that. And I think, like I say, whilst there's obviously still things that their fans feel they can improve on, it's a start. And, he's been involved in sort of the coaching aspects and getting in this new manager and sort of the day-to-day running, and obviously having an office at the training ground as well. I think it just helps, doesn't it? Because players know they can go to him if there's anything. They don't always have to go direct to the manager if they feel they can't. And it's like I say, it's using that word again, isn't it? Link and finding a balance. I love those words, John. They're like the buzzwords for tonight. But I think it is important. And I think that the more people understand about the role, the better it should become, if that makes sense. Or the slightly more happy people should be. Because listen, there's no pleasing everybody like 100%. But you know what I mean? I think, I don't know, maybe it's me just getting on a dead big high. But I just think this is about time. I don't know. I don't know what else you want to add.
No, I think you've covered everything there. But for me, the buzzword is support. It just supports everyone, supports the fans, support the players, obviously supports the manager and supports the board. Because let's be honest, the board don't know anything about football, let alone the women's football. So
this is it, yeah.
So this is it. And like I say, if one or two roles can be created, and let's not beat around the bushes where if one person is brought in, that person will have a team. You'd like to think to support them. And that's where somebody else can come in, isn't it, as well? So, definitely exciting times. I'm pretty sure that'll definitely follow through with it. And hopefully, February, March time, we can actually get that announced.
Yeah, it's interesting, like you say, because obviously you mentioned there, and again, that was something I was sort of going to talk about, but it links in nicely. You talked about sort of, knowing women's football, and I think for me that's a big one. Like, you can't, for me, you can't go and just get any random. Knowing football is great, but knowing the women's game is even more important for me, because it's not the same. People say, oh well, it's football. Yes, it's football, but the whole operations and the way it works, from wages to contracts to just everything, the day-to-day running of it is different completely to the men's game. And sort of it does require, like you say, at the minute, it's sort of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, John Murter running it. Has he got a background in women's football? Absolutely not. Does he know what he's doing? Probably not. You've got a general manager. Has he come from the women's game? No, he hasn't. Does he have an idea? And, that's not me slagging off people and saying they're clueless. Obviously, they've got like the business brains and the day-to-day running. But like you say, just having that specialist, shall we call it, in the women's game and knowing it is going to be huge. And that for me is where it's going to hopefully be a success. I want to sort of link in then to implementing a playing style across all women's teams, because I find that really interesting. Obviously, the men's sort of, I want to say the men's has an identity. It did, and then it kind of, it changes. But you get the drift usually, and you even hear it at women's games. It was under Solskjaer. People say, oh, well, the men play like this and the women are doing the same, and the academy play like this and the under 23s. And there was sort of that thing. And whether you thought it was good or bad, it happened. And now it's kind of like we're looking at the bigger picture. So we're thinking, right, maybe deviate away from if that was a thing, if the women were, sort of set up the same way as the men or played the same way, whatever, that's for people to decide. But I think for me, if we're getting somebody and say, right, Mark, what's your style? Where are we going with this? We have those conversations with the coaches at the development team. We have those conversations with coaches at sort of what we call RTC academy level. And I think if there's a clear structure, and I hate to use them as an example, but City have that within their women's side. And I was very fortunate enough a couple of years ago to have a tour of the training ground. And there's two clear sort of plans, men's team, women's team, and all the men's teams mirrored and all the women's teams mirrored. And that's right the way down from the first team, like I say, all the way down to the bottom. And I wouldn't say I was surprised, because obviously they're chucking a heck of a lot of money at it. But I thought, you know what? Not every club has that. And they sort of talked about and compared to other clubs. And I think if we can get that and get a set style of play, as long as it's successful, then, that's going to stand us in good stead. And I think it's clear for everyone. And then it becomes clearer when players are being coached. They're actually learning. They're not just learning to pass and to move. There's a detail of why. I think a big thing for me, and something that I certainly put in sort of my own sessions, is, the why. Why are you doing something? How are you going to do it? Why is it important? And really educating a player as well, just saying, right, pass that ball 10 yards, take a touch, do this. Do you know what I mean? So I think for me, playing style is a big thing, and I'm glad it's been brought up. But do you just want to expand on sort of that, having a sort of an identity?
Yeah, obviously it's massive. I'm not too bothered if the men's team play a similar way to the women's team. That doesn't really bother me too much. I can understand that it's the United way to play a certain way. I get that, but I don't think it really impacts results too much on the pitch. But what is important is when you go through the age groups, you naturally can progress because you know exactly what to do in the level above you. So if, for example, a Maria Edwards was to come into the senior team now, she would at least know her role, you'd like to think, up until this season, because obviously you've had 3 seasons under Casey and Charlotte Healy and Martin Howe, who have all got that relationship. She would have been perfect to come in. You know that if you're playing at that, like the attacking wide right or attacking wide left forward, you know what's expected because you do it all the way down. You see it in the men's game, the under 23s. It was very much a 4-2-1-3. I know that again is changing under Ragnick, but this is it now. We're going through that change, aren't we? And I don't know how Skinner's doing with the devs in the women's team just yet, because I still think that we're still transitioning. We're still trying to see what Skinner's style of play is, but it is massively different. It is important. I still think at the moment, if you're going to go into this much detail, I don't even know if the senior players are capable of doing what Skinner wants to do at the moment, let alone our devs. And that's obviously controversial, but you could argue the other way around. You know, the players don't. Skinner doesn't communicate it to the players in the right way. But at the moment, I think we need to find out what Skinner's style of play is, and then match it up, don't we? And then you can obviously go from there and think, well, Charlotte Healy knows her players. Yeah. Those players might not be able to do what Skinner wants, because maybe even the senior team doesn't want that. It is massive. They definitely need to match up, or else you'll be like a duck out of water if you suddenly jump into the senior team. But I think that's what takes the time, and I think it's going to take at least a year to 18 months for us to kind of see the devs come through into the first team anyway. I think we would have seen it by now. I think we would have seen in the Conti Cup games. We would have seen Carno, we would have seen Marie Edwards. I could see them going out on loan and then coming back. So I still think that gap's too big for us to kind of worry about that just yet.
Yeah.
But we do need to see a style of play. And we need to see like a successful style of play that people can buy into, not just the players, but the rest of the coaching staff at all levels. And the fans as well. The fans need to buy into it as well, don't they?
Absolutely. I'm going to use my favourite word, that link, again. I think because at the minute, you sort of sum it up perfectly now. Obviously, Charlotte took over from Tom Fitton. She was there, obviously, in season 2. And I think what, like you say, what is important is there is that clear thing, like you say, especially when the emphasis is on not only coaching and developing players, but bringing them through. Like you say, there's no point in Charlotte playing one style of play. Let's say, for example, the devs play out from the back and then Skinner wants to play long ball or vice versa. Like you say, it's completely mismatched. And it's not that there's anything wrong with either style of play, but like you say, when you're a young player, it's difficult enough when you're making that step up because there is, and I know we talked about it on my Tuesday show with Catherine, there's no in between. You've sort of got your, 16, you can be in the devs first team. There's no 18s, 21s first team like there is in the men's. So I think that's where it sort of becomes, sort of important to go on to that. And like you say, to have that conversation to make sure everything's sort of linked and everybody's on the same pathway. And yeah, just like you say, it just makes it better, doesn't it? Going to style of play then. I don't know if you want to ask me or I'll ask you.
Well, it is a difference. Yeah, look, it's a massive talking point in the fan base. It's probably irritates me more than most because I am a Skinner fan. I'm happy to say that. I look at it as he's come in. He's been chosen to come in for a reason. It's because of his managing technique. That's why he's come in. They've chosen him.
Yeah. Suitable candidate for the job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we saw something that Ragnick said, and Matt, I think you tweeted me in it or you tagged me in it about the manager having to adapt to the players.
Yeah,
and everyone saying, "Oh, yeah, Skinner needs to do the same." But I replied back saying, "Well, you can change the whole squad within the whole start 11 within two transfer windows."
Yeah.
So I don't think you can kind of incorporate that in the women's game. I think in the women's game, the manager has got more power. You see managers sacked less often, and you see so many players coming and going quite quickly that a manager can have a bit more control. But yeah, in regards to the actual style of play, under Casey, you saw it quite a lot. Whether or not you liked it or not, you kind of knew what you was getting. You was going to be very strong at the back. Yeah, you see the odd mistake, of course, because we wasn't at that level of Chelsea or City back then. But generally, you knew that it was going to be difficult to break down. And then if you can get 1 or 2 goals as well, then you'd win 1 or 2-0. That's why we never lost against the big 3 in the way that we lost against Chelsea 6-1. But you could also say that it was very predictable back then as well, because we did kind of play the same starting 11 when they were fit all the time, the same style of play all the time. Now I think it's completely been ripped out the window, and I think fans don't like it because it's not necessarily the United way. To me, it's very much of a European way, and I don't know where Skinner's got this from. Never played in Europe. It's either been US or Birmingham. But to me, when I look at the style of play that we play now, it's nothing to do with wing play. The more detail I look at it, the wingers are just there to occupy space or occupy players to create space for balls over the top.
Yeah.
I listened to a lot of Skinner's interviews and his post-match and pre-match discussions, and he very often talks about invading space behind. He hasn't mentioned it lately, but he mentioned it at the very start. And we saw that a lot at the start where Blundell and Honor got in behind the defence and to put crosses in, and they've even got on the score sheet a lot as well. We don't see as much of that lately, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it started to be a bit too defensive, but I think when I saw us play against Arsenal and City lately, I'm seeing that it doesn't matter how long it takes to get the ball wide because that's not our end goal. I'm seeing us play a lot of ends the middle of the park. It doesn't matter if it takes 5 or 10 passes because speed isn't the end goal. The end goal that I think the tactic is that they'll catch the defence off guard by a runner coming from the fullback position or a runner coming from midfield, getting into space behind the defenders, and then the ball going over the top or a through ball into where the ball would then go into a position where you can score off it. So completely a different way of Casey, where I actually enjoyed Casey's way of playing, by the way. I did enjoy that. I enjoyed the long ball over the top for Galton or Hansen to run onto.
Yeah.
I enjoyed getting Galton and Hansen on the ball and actually driving the players. And we don't really have that anymore. But I do think that if the players can master this, that, you know, it does work, because you do see it in a lot of Spanish football, and it does work. It's just that at the moment, I don't think Skinner's experienced enough. He's only been around for 4 years at this kind of level. So obviously he's still learning how to get that message across. And our players have probably never played that way either. You know, we're trained as as youngsters. You know, it's only recently that playing out from the back has started. It used to be just put the ball in the middle of the park. The centre midfielders would win the ball in the air. You get the ball out wide. You get your faster players to run it into the box and then cross it in, get on the end of it. That's pretty much how you learn at it. And now all of a sudden, things are changing. And I think our players probably aren't used to Skinner's way of putting this message across. So you put all that, trying to link it in with the devs. It's like wow, what's going on here? It's a completely different way of playing, and that's the way it's coming across to me. It is new. Skinner's got a 2-year contract. He may even need 2 year plus one, if that's what it is, because it's going to take that long to kind of pass that message all the way down. I don't know if you want to come in on that, Matt, but that's the kind of way I'm looking at the way that we're playing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for me. You sort of talk about where the styles come from, and I think for me, it sort of seems mixed. You know, he references Pep a lot, and I don't know if it's sort of half American, half European. You know, where it's come from. I think it's interesting because you look at it and it is very mismatched. Like, I think for me, you know, it's sort of, it seems like it's two styles muddled together almost. Like you say, there's the playing out from the back, and then there's the bit where it's sort of, like you say, finding the space. And I think when I think back to sort of, he took over Birmingham, and it was what they called the spring series. There was like a little tournament sort of in between the season when it changed from summer to winter, and they came 7th in that. And made an FA Cup final as well, which wasn't terrible. That was all right for Birmingham. Then it got to sort of the next season, and I think it was 17-18. They came 5th, and they got some really good results against the top teams. And the way he built that was sort of, it was a solid defensive foundation, sort of what we tried with Casey. Obviously not played out from the back, but it was solid, and it had the likes of Staniforth and Ladd, who we have now, funnily enough, Mannion as well, in that team. And it was like I say, it was possession based, it was well organized, really good defensively, and then attacking wise, it sort of looked to hit on sort of the counter or like the break, and it was a mix. And I look at it now and I just think he's implemented bits of that and possibly bits of Orlando and bits of what he's maybe, I don't know, he seems to go on about Pep, like I mentioned earlier, sort of chuck that in and sort of come up with this, I don't know, I want to say like mix up. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm 100% on it, because I like things that are clear. And I think at the minute, it's sort of that transition, because he's not got the players for it. He's got this idea of what he wants, but it does seem a little bit muddled. And obviously we saw sort of the false 9, and then it's disappeared. Now, I do wonder if that was due to injuries, that was his like little plan B. But yeah, I think it's one of them for me where it's interesting. It's not. I can see why he'd sort of look to do it, but the thing with the wingers baffles me. And I said this, you know, obviously we had a conversation the other day, like you just mentioned, about playing players to suit what you have and using a system to suit the players you have. But then I think I said in reply to, you know, if we're not using wingers, why don't we play a 4-3-3? because at the minute it seems quite, I don't know if flat's the right word in midfield, but we know it's very, very narrow. So I'm thinking, well, if we play a 4-3-3 and he wants it compact, which is what it seems at the minute, and we're not going wide, there's no point in having wingers for me, because it's like we get the ball to them wingers. Not many times have they done what they used to do and go and take on a player 1v1. They've either cut inside or, like you said, they've been there to give sort of the fullback an option to create space in the middle. So if the middle's the way he wants to play and open up those gaps and spaces, that's absolutely fine. But you don't need wingers to do that. So then for me, you need to change the formation. I think what's kind of, again, I think it was Deborah mentioned on your Thursday show, we've not seemed to change formation, and we've not seemed to very much rotate the squad. Now, granted, injuries play a little part, but I just think when we have had a fully fit squad, why aren't we changing? You know, like I say, there's nothing wrong with playing centrally, but change it to suit, because at the minute I don't feel like we're getting a style that's benefiting what we have. And I think if a 4-3-3 we did, listen, if we had obviously back four, if we had a midfield of, you know, Tooney in the middle, Hansen on the right hand side of the three, Leah on the left, and then I don't know, maybe Alessia, or even actually I'd probably put Alessia centrally. You know, probably Hansen and Galton either side of Alessia, and then have your midfield of maybe Jackie, Haley, Tooney, something like that. Those three. Yeah. And like I say, your wide players as sort of wide forwards in a front three. Something like that, I think, would be much more beneficial to us, because if those players are used to cutting in, they then know, oh, I'm not a winger because it's a 4-3-3. I don't need to be wide. Whereas sort of a 4-4-1, or it's not even a 4-1, it's sort of a 4-2-3-1. You're relying on that three to expand, because obviously with the one up front, they need to be wide and support. So for me, you may as well push them higher anyway and just have them more centrally and compact. And there's nothing wrong with being compact. Like I said earlier, you know, if that's the way you want to set up, and if he's working to be defensively secure, like I was at Birmingham, fine. But at the minute, your setup doesn't seem to mirror the way you want to play or the way you have the idea. And again, this is just me talking, like I say, from working like in that level and with players and sort of at the sort of the higher standard than just grassroots. And I think if we can get that and then get the players that he wants and get the playing out from the back right, then we might go somewhere. Obviously, it's hard because you come in, and with Man United, people want results instantly, and I get that. But then I said this in pre-season, it needs time. And when I said time, I didn't just mean like 2 or 3 months, you know, to put in a full style of football without having your own players is very difficult. And, you know, I think back to sort of when I first started at grassroots, talking ages ago now, a while back, I took over a team, and at the time they were under sixes. And obviously, as people know, it's not the full 11 aside. And in my team, I had one goalkeeper and the rest were strikers. And it's like, you know, getting those to play and getting people in positions. Now, I'm not saying, obviously, listen, it's completely different, 6 aside to 11 aside, but the process applies that if you've not got the tools for the job, so to speak, it's going to be hard. So when Mark's trying to implement a style without his players and without what he wants for that style and still working on the style, it does become difficult. And that's not me, you know, leap into his defense. Listen, I'm like you, you know, I'm never going to absolutely slate the guy. Yes, we've criticized, and rightly so, but at the end of the day, it takes longer than 3 months to get what you want across and to drill it into those players constantly. And this is even with, you know, 5-6 days a week of training of, you know, 2-3 hours a day. Even that contact time, you know, it's a whole process. And listen, this could take another 3-4 months, you know. Then we've got to look at January. How many is he bringing in? If he brings in 2 or 3 in January, it's not quite resetting, but it's more like, right, these have got to be on board. And if they're not on board with what he wants, they've got to get up to speed like everybody else. So talking about style, it's difficult to sort of label it, but I do think we need to sort of mix it up a little bit. But I'll let you jump in.
Yeah, just something that you said there about like the formation and setting up defensively. The way I see it is that it's packing out the midfield because they're shorter passes, and obviously if you have shorter passes, you stand less chance of giving the ball away.
Yeah,
that's another reason why we don't have long balls or we don't switch the players often as we should. So yeah, for me, I don't think we necessarily set up defensively. That's why we do leak goals. But I think if you've got the ball, you stand less chance of actually conceding the goal. And I think that's that's what we're trying to do. We just try to keep the ball as easy as possible by playing short passes.
It's very cautious, though, isn't it?
It is cautious, but it's patient. So I think he's trying to say to everyone, just be patient, keep hold of the ball, and then at the right time, you then make the run and catch them off guard, where you do play that killer pass.
Yeah.
The problem that we're having, I think, is one of two things. One, we haven't got the right personnel, apart from maybe Tooney, who can make that run.
Pass.
Yeah, and make the pass. So you got to get someone who can make the pass, and you got to have someone who can make the run.
Yeah.
And also the person on the ball has got to see the run as well. Everyone's got to be on the same wavelength, haven't they? And I think that's there is why we're choosing the players that we're choosing, and we're leaving other players on the bench. I'm not saying that's the right or wrong thing, but that is, for me, what it's down to. We can carry this conversation on, Matt, and I know we want to talk.
Oh, we could. No, well, all I was going to say on that was obviously it's interesting because you say that, and I believe we do have players capable of it.
Yeah.
But we don't seem to play them, which it baffles me because you're talking about the right pass and the right sort of run and movement, and I think it bugs me because I think Tooney plays a lot, and she's one of them. Jackie will, when fit, be first choice anyway. You've got Ladd and Risa, and it just grates on me a little bit because I've said it, and I seem to repeat myself in this. It's our best midfield in 4 years, but it's also our biggest problem because of the unbalanced nature of it. And this is the problem because, like you said, you've got players where he wants to do that, but then you've got two wingers that are ineffective. So in a way, for me, that's causing a problem because they're on the pitch. And it's not saying take them off the pitch, but it's like, get them more involved. And this is why I'm saying a change in formation, could be the thing. And like you said, but what is interesting is, like you say, you talked about being patient and playing that pass, but it also, and you talked about obviously people needing to make that run. It also sort of shows in the way we set up. I still think Alessia, she gets through a hell of a lot, but I still think she's isolated. And that's not a criticism of her. That's a criticism of the way we play or the lack of support. Now, if you've got one in behind, that one needs to be with them. And we could analyse this, like you said, for another half hour. But all I want to say is just before we move on to Brighton, is like you said, it does seem cautious. And the gap between defence and midfield is literally about 5-10 yards. And it's a problem in terms of wanting to shift the play. Because if you want to move it quick, you saw how many times we caught offside against Leicester. And I think unless there's somebody stretching that play, two midfielders at least have got to break lines when you've got a lone forward. You have to have at least two, maybe three up there, because when somebody plays a high line like Leicester did and compact, we're compact and we're very narrow like that, and you've got defence and midfielder 5 yards ahead, it doesn't work. Yeah. And then you've got your forward who's a million miles away, and your pressing isn't there because poor Leslie's busting a gut on her own, and the second press isn't there because they're sat in this rigid line, solid, of literally like midfield. And it's almost like you say, it's almost too cautious. It's fine with being solid, but for me, that's not the way to be solid because you're not breaking lines and we're not doing what he wants. We're not dragging players out of possession. We're not finding that killer ball. He talked about sort of immaturity into the other day. I don't even think it's that. I think it's the way the message is being conveyed. He's got the idea, but they haven't. And that's what we need to work on for me. It's like, right, you can drag this player out of position, which will enable said player here, Alessia, you need to get in between fullback and centre half, drag them both in towards you, and that frees Tooney up to attack the middle. Or Leah, you need to occupy whatever, centre mid or left winger and left back to enable space in there. And I think it's those little movements and patterns of play. We've seen it. We know we can do it because we've seen it against City in the Conti Cup. We've seen it, when we went to the King Power and beat Leicester and we dragged them all over the way. There was massive gaps in midfield for us to exploit. So it's there. It's just not fully there. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave it there, John, now because you've got me in coach mode. And I'm going to be.
We'll discuss this again on another show.
Absolutely. But what I do want to move on just for sort of the final few minutes is Brighton tomorrow. Obviously 12:30, early one for fans. It's on the BBC. This is the one. We looked at December's fixtures and I said 3 points Leicester, 3 points Villa, beat Everton in the Conti, and I said Brighton's a potential banana skin. Now I don't want to go into this saying I'd be happy with a point, but looking sort of how far we've dropped and how we've been recently, is a point necessarily a disaster, or is that a little bit too negative and we should be going to win? I mean, listen, we should be going to win anyway. You never go into a game to lose, but is a point a disaster is what I'm going to say.
Based on other results, yeah, it would be a disaster because you need the win. The other results have forced us to need a win here.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But of how good Brighton are playing, because of the journey, the fact that we're playing away, and because of our current form, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But you've still got to go for that win, haven't you?
Oh yeah, not doubting that. I'm just saying, if we came away with a point, is it a bigger disaster as people are going to make out?
Would it be a disaster, disappointment? I think you
still.
No,
we know it'd be a disappointment. What would it be a disaster?
I don't think it would be. I don't think it would be a disaster.
Yeah.
But then but it's going to get to a point where, because it's like Tottenham away, a point there wasn't a disaster in my opinion. Tottenham were flying, and the fact that it was winning right up until the final minute. That's a disaster, but generally, looking back, a draw against Tottenham away wasn't a disaster. But when are we going to get to a point where we start finding that balance, thinking, okay, well, all of a sudden now we got to turn these draws into wins. It's tough. Now it probably wouldn't be a disaster because Brighton are playing well, but we need to start winning, don't we? Soon. We got Everton in the Conti Cup, which doesn't mean too much. That's a must win for the Conti Cup. Villa at home, Birmingham, West Ham. So I guess that if we're saying, right, if we draw against Brighton, then win Villa, West Ham, and Birmingham, then that's 10 points out of 12. Then all of a sudden that's quite good. But I haven't got the confidence that we can draw against Brighton and then win the other three. That's the problem that we got now, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I think you do have to take every game as it comes. You can look at it as a big block, but I don't think the blocks are working at the moment because we're just getting too many draws. So obviously we've got to go there and win. I think speaking to fans as often as you do as well, Matt, I think it's a style of play. It's a way we draw, it's a way we win, the way we lose.
It's a manner.
If we play really well, we dominate the game 1-0, and then all of a sudden they have a counter attack. To score off it, I think we'll be disappointed, but we'll look back and think, we dominated the game, we played really well, we should have just scored more. Whereas if we get dominated and we struggle to create chances and just about scrape a 0-0 or 1-1, then everyone's going to be on a downer. So it's not just about the result, is it, with Man United fans, it's about everything else as well.
I think this is it. I look and I think, well, actually, we've won as many as start again. We have won as many as we have drawn, and we've also conceded more than we've scored. But that said, we're sat having only lost 2 games. Now, yes, we're 6th, but those draws have killed us. So I think for me, I was sort of saying before, is a draw a disaster? Obviously, it's must win, but I just feel like, looking at other fixtures on Sunday, if we only pick up a point, West Ham play Everton. Now, if sort of Everton win that, they're ahead of us because they're only 2 points behind. If West Ham win it, they're level on points with us. They pull further ahead. Brighton are obviously sat in 3rd, 3 points ahead of us already. You've then got sort of Birmingham play Man City, so that's likely Man City, who then catch us. We're looking here already. Bar Reading sort of, playing Chelsea. We could end up with a draw, literally sat down in 9th place, which going into Wednesday must win and Aston Villa must win. Is disaster the right word? It could easily. This is a weekend where we've got a tricky game. Villa against Spurs could also go either way. Spurs could win that. Villa could win it. If Villa win it, again, they'll have more points than us. So, like I say, I don't want to put a downer on things, but is a point enough for me? No. Would I be happy giving a point now? Not really. But at the end of the day, if we do come away from there, listen, anybody that's watched us against Brighton away knows that we always struggle. Last year was a woeful performance. It was a draw. The year before was absolutely dreadful midweek, and it was a draw. So something's got to change. We've got to win. And like I say, I don't like putting, but that's the reality. We've got to be realistic here. We're honest people. We could come away from a draw And if other results don't go our way, we could be looking at 8th or 9th place going into a must-win Conti Cup game and a must-win game against Villa before the break to get some confidence back. It's tricky, isn't it? And like you say, not Villa, Brighton are flying. They've not conceded many goals. They've not drawn any matches, interestingly enough. They've had 5 wins and 3 losses. So looking at that, something's going to give stats-wise, isn't it, John? They're probably going to get a draw now. But no, I just feel like it's one of them. Like I say, I hate labeling games as must-win because it's pressure, but I don't want to think about getting a point and everybody else just going bump and us just going the other way. It's horrible, isn't it? It really is.
And that could easily happen. It really could. It could happen. We could be dominated throughout that game and struggle and walk away happy with a point. But we just can't, because it's going to get to a point where, as you say, we're just going to keep slipping down the league. And we'll keep looking, and me being me, I'll keep looking at it thinking, we've got Birmingham coming up, we've got West Ham coming up.
But at the minute, West Ham's ahead of us, and we've got Tottenham at home in Jan, and they're ahead of us. It's only really Birmingham where I think, 3 points.
Exactly. And we're going to end up getting to March or April with 80 games. It's
no cup runs to show for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's where obviously then more questions will be asked. It's tough. I think when you look at it, the top 2 are obviously flying. Well done to them. But then everyone underneath them have won, drew. Everything is just, there's no consistency there.
It's very open, isn't it? It reminds me of the Championship a little bit. It's like anybody can more or less beat anybody bar maybe the bottom 2.
Yeah. No, it's true. And that's what I was thinking as well. The winner of the Championship will be the one who could put the most consistent one together. Until 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was Durham and Liverpool leading the pack.
Durham are 4th.
Exactly. It just shows how strong that league is. But going back to the WSL, it just shows how tight at the moment WSL is. And it just makes you think, if everything was like 11 months ago, when everything looked quite rosy for us, where would we be?
Yeah, we'll beat Brighton.
Yeah, exactly. We'd have been flying this time last year. We was flying, wasn't we? But a lot of things have happened, hasn't it? So it's definitely been a reset, and it goes back to that style of play and a different manager and players playing differently and new players coming in January or summer. But yeah, it's just that. And even before the season started, we as fans said we just need to stabilise. And I think that's the biggest thing, isn't it? We need to stabilise. Stabilise is 4th, So we've got to make sure that we at least get 4th. But at the moment, I'm still positive in the sense of, we're only 1 win away from Champions League, but we need to start beating the teams around us, don't we? And not drawing.
I think this is it. You mentioned consistency there, and I think the positive way to look at it is if we do beat Brighton, we close the gap on them. If we pick up 3 points against Everton in the Conti Cup and qualify as group winners, and then we beat Villa, it's a different picture. It's completely different landscape. And like you say, I think it's hit reset. And I said at the start of the season, a lot of people laughed at me and sort of said why. I said, listen, I would be happy with 4th and 2 decent cup runs. And now everybody's like, you know what, I agree now. And it's like, well, you've got to be realistic. Like you say, it's a new manager, new style of play. It's almost like hitting reset. And I don't want to be harsh, but I think Casey leaving has knocked us back. People say, oh, well, it's not. But I think being realistic and honest, it has set us back. And I think this is now rebuild time. And whether people want to admit that or they like it or not, we are where we are. There's no point in hiding and sugarcoating it.
It's knocked us back, not just because of whether or not you think Casey's better than Skinner or what. It's knocked us back.
It's nothing like that.
It's knocked us back because all of a sudden now we had no transfer window. The summer just gone. We could have brought more players in. It seems like that all just froze. And now obviously it takes time for Skinner to put his
stamp
mark on things. Yeah, so it has. It's put us a year behind.
It takes Mark time to mark his mark on things.
How's that? Something like that, yeah. But yeah, that's why that's the position that we're at now. So to finish a 4th wouldn't be too bad.
No, I don't think so
but obviously you can't settle for 4th as a club because we want to see that progression, don't we?
Yeah.
If we don't get 4th, I don't think that would be Skinner's fault. I think that would be the board's fault for putting us in this position.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully, you know, we can be having conversations on reaction shows and we're absolutely bouncing off the walls because we've got 9 points and we've climbed that bit further, shall we say? Because I think, yeah, before Christmas as well, we don't want to be going into the new year on a downer. And I think January recruitment, if we can get even a couple of faces in, will be important. Just something fresh, something to lift the team, something to lift the fans, and yeah, see where it takes us. But listen, it won't be football if we didn't have ups and downs and highs and lows and different opinions, would it? So we'll leave it there. And like I say, fingers crossed we can have a little bit more flying off the walls, bouncing around the room, happy, delighted conversations.
Absolutely, yeah.
Rest of the week, then obviously tomorrow. Tomorrow. I'm at FC United. I'll be covering that. So yeah, their last home game before Christmas. Go and see a couple of good friends there. Wish them well for Christmas, obviously as well. I think Ben and Nat will be taking over the socials for the Brighton game. So again, look out for that. Schedule will go out for this coming week as well. And yeah, that's about it. So thanks very much for joining me, John. Jump in because I know you've got your hands up like you're at school.
Also, if you talk about FC United, look out for my local team, Stourbridge, playing Sheffield United in the FA Cup. That's going to be very interesting. Tier 2 versus Tier 5. Let's have a look, see how Andy Fisher and co get on there.
Absolutely. So yeah, interesting round of fixtures, interesting weekend. Hopefully interesting times ahead, and we will see you soon. Thank you.